Okay, remember that they're changing my voice. This video is about why I'm right about what should be done. I'm going to approach it from the angle of talking about what is best for whites, Jews, and LGBT people, as the people who are leading the charge against me are rich whites, rich Jews, rich LGBT people in certain groups, what have you. So first of all, when we ask ourselves what's best for these groups, let's ask ourselves, what's the difference between people who are actually concerned with people's spiritual and physical well-being versus hateful people who have a kind of satanic, self-destructive, abuse-based culture? Abuse-based culture, right? They have a satanic, self-destructive, abuse-based culture. So it's more, evil supremacy than white or Jewish or LGBT supremacy. That part is key. Because when we ask ourselves the three questions I always want you to ask yourself when you're faced with a complex issue or an important issue, which is, what is it? Which are, what is it? What does it mean? And what should the moral person do? Right? What is it? Right? It's a disagreement over the direction of humanity. It's righteousness versus wickedness. Right? It's universal pinpoint and moral precision versus psychotic propaganda and coercion behind the scenes and manipulation. It's what's actually best for everyone, including whites, Jews, and LGBT people, versus crazy people who don't think things through, insisting on their way. Right? So what is it? What does it mean? What should the moral person do? What should we do? What should you do? What should we do? What should the moral person do? So what is it? What does it mean? What should we do? And why should we elevate the righteous instead of feed into propaganda, theater arts, idolatry, psychology, what have you? Okay, so if the devil was in America and he wanted to make someone shallow, as his main tactic, he would give them money and put them in white culture, and that includes church cultures. Bear with me, you'll see that I'm right. So clearly, good versus evil is universal moral precision versus psychotic propaganda and behind the scenes manipulation. First and foremost, right? First and foremost, good versus evil plays out as universal pinpoint and moral precision versus psychotic propaganda and behind the scenes manipulation. So some vehicle just drove by. They're doing a lot to distract the situation here. But I want to make sure that you understand this. So again, why is this part important? Because this is the essence of why I'm right. It is good versus evil. And that plays out as universal pinpoint and moral precision versus psychotic propaganda and behind the scenes manipulation. First and foremost. For example, when it comes to podcasts and content creation on social media, when black people complain about whites, Jews, and LGBT people, usually it's gays, it is almost always within the boundaries of white, Jewish, and LGBT eugenics-based mass murder, mass rape, mass deception, mass theft, mass poisoning, mass exploitation, political corruption, etc. So we see these kind of token minorities complaining, and so-called thugs behaving like token minorities when they complain, accepting the boundaries of a game, which seems very similar to Freemasonry, right? It's like there's a bunch of Masons, and they're saying, do it this way, do it this way. That's how it comes off, regardless of why they're behaving the way they are. So you see people like, you say Candace Owens, right? She plays the conservative role. You see people who are in the Democratic Party, they play the Democratic role, but it's always within the boundaries of continuing the game. They don't truly tell the complete truth and try to get people together to end the game. They play the game. That is a key difference when it comes to the complaints. You'll see what I mean shortly. When whites complain about black people, it is as oppressors, downplaying that the problem starts with them, but is not limited to them. It starts with them, but it is not limited to them. For example, if somebody decides to be a serial killer because they don't make $100,000 a year, is it all the white man's fault? No. If they've been hacking their brain the whole time, making sure they come to that conclusion, is it like damn near all their fault, if not all their fault? Yes. But it's case by case, right? So the bigger picture is that it starts with them, but it's not limited to them. Okay? The average, one statistic I've seen is that the average white family has 10 times more wealth than the average black family. The average black household has $48,000 per year. The average white household is like $74,000, but the income, but the wealth goes beyond that because of certain social factors and cultural factors. I've heard different statistics. When I was younger, they used to say that black people were 13% of the population, own less than 1/2 of 1% of the capital. Now they say they own more like 3 to 4% of the capital, but they still are disproportionately poor. So who has the money? Right, the vast majority of politicians are white. The vast majority of rich people in this country are white, Jewish, and LGBT people. So who has the money? Who has the political power? Who compartmentalizes who? Okay, pretty straightforward. So when white people are complaining, it's as people who have the power to change things and always had the power to change things. People who failed the country miserably to the point where there's rock and roll people everywhere, heavy metal people, homeless people, wife beaters, rapists, thugs. For example, if people who thought like me were in charge and we had a black martial arts government the whole time, there would be zero homelessness. Few people would be rapists. Would have masterfully figured out how to solve that. Few people would beat their wives, if any. Okay, because when one rules with insight and love and morality and solid points of references for what is ideal, and people are kind of addressed and chastised based on not being moral instead of not being a conformist in one of these failed cultures, thugs and businessmen and jocks and crooked cops and the military corruption. Right? They don't have solid points of references for what is ideal. And obviously what happens when you do that is you get a very crooked society where people are peer pressuring each other to be immoral instead of being people who are conforming to a standard of universal pinpoint and moral precision through the Royal African Falcon top martial arts order. The difference between being called a devil and a soul brother. And the difference between having a devil, doggy, dog, concrete jungle, rat race society and having a soul brother society. Pretty straightforward, right? When you hear it, there's like no other way it could be. So when we see jocks and military types and businessmen and skaters and rockers, etc., their spectrums do not equal or surpass soul brothers. And one must highlight this to declare the glory of God. You can't declare the glory of God by pointing to a corrupt politician and saying that it's in him. It's not. Or pointing to these failed churches and their shallow white supremacy upholding mentalities. It's not. Including token minorities. Including LGBT people. To declare the glory of God, you have to point to a heterosexual person who really declares it. Clearly. Now, if we look at European history, who is it? George Washington? No. Abraham Lincoln? No. He did some things that people respect, but he doesn't clearly convey the Spirit of God. He looks like an occultist or something, and he's a very kind of lukewarm person at best. That's what he was. No offense to anybody. Who would it be? Joel Osteen? No. Billy Graham, Pat Robertson? No. Who would it be? Van Damme, Chuck Norris? No. Mitch McConnell? No. Donald Trump? No. Joe Biden? No. Some people might be a big fan of Kennedy, but he didn't really convey the glory of God. He was a politician. He seemed to be more fair than the vast majority of them, but he doesn't really declare the glory of God because holy is like pure. So who purifies himself? Well, in popular culture, the closest thing to it we see is basically soul brothers and certain types of martial artists, but none of these guys really get to Martin Luther King or better. So to declare the glory of God as someone who is not racist, you have to fairly assign importance. You have to be honest about the fact that Martin Luther King goes beyond Billy Graham. And who wouldn't be honest about that? Somebody who's trying to get people to look up to white people. How? Unfairly. And that's self-destructive. We see what happens when they do that. Thousands of white people overdose on drugs every year. Thousands of white people die without adequate access to health care and a doctor. Thousands of white people commit suicide in America alone. Why? Because the culture is killing them. When they ask themselves why should they keep going, they see devil culture everywhere. And on top of that, their race is oppressing other races more than those races are oppressing them by far. And so they just give up. Along with people of color who see this unfair system that is killing them as well, that is ruining their lives, that's keeping them from living a fulfilling life. So what is it? What does it mean? What should the moral person do? Should they play dumb about the fact that Christ is back and I'm mulatto? My father is a very black person from Africa, Nigeria? Or should they just say, hey, what the hell? All the suffering that is happening is magically okay, and it's worth it because of the corrupt and pathetic and narcissistic spirit of the governing class. That's stupid, right? So if you actually cared about the spiritual state of white people, which is very much about righteousness, morality, and you actually cared about the physical state of white people, you would not play stupid as a Republican or as a Democrat. You would not be a conservative. You would be scrambling to change the country into a morally precise country. Just because somebody's saying white power or they're a white nationalist or they're in your social club doesn't mean they care about you. Do they want to go point by point with me on this issue? No. And truly search your souls and ask yourselves, what does it mean? I was going to make this part in another video, but let's just shoot through this real quickly here. So let's talk about Jewish females. We'll even talk about a leftist, a pro-Israel Jewish leftist witch. No offense to them. Some of these people can be kind of nice, and they seem very sad and very, they have some kind of nervous breakdown. They seem like they're on the verge of a nervous breakdown. Okay, and I say, what's their issues? And they say that they don't want this to be said because what's going on is what they're used to. And they think it works in their favor. And they say things like, quote unquote, I can actually do this for once in my life. And long ago, they decided that they wouldn't go back to poverty and being forgotten or left behind. Okay? And so I respond by saying, look, my war on poverty plan and my other plans are very affordable for the rich. And they make it so no one is left behind and everyone's life is getting better over time, even the rich. Only complete lunatics in denial don't see it. There's a load taken off their shoulders. Okay? That guilt weighs heavily on people. It ruins lives. The main difference between the two programs isn't even the fact that my program is far better for the economy, far better for people, right? The two models. The main difference is that you're torturing people and accepting having a worse state for you, your family, the country, and the world. That's the main kind of, world-based difference. Obviously, my system is more righteous, therefore it's more holy, but the main difference that an agnostic or an atheist would see is that their model is torturing everybody on the spectrum and it's making it so people are in a worse state. It's like Palpatine in Star Wars when he starts firing the thunderbolts at Luke Skywalker, right? He starts becoming more ugly and ugly. Because as he's hit him with sadistic evil, he's becoming more evil inside and out. That was an artistic way to express what I'm explaining here. For any questions, put in the comments. So the next question they would say, the next things they would bring up, they would say, well, who looks up to who when they walk by someone? See, I'm in Santa Cruz, right? By the beach, and I walk by people, and some liberal Jews walk by and say, that guy's in very good shape. He looks very handsome. He looks very righteous. Okay? but the guys I usually date aren't so, don't look so much like that, right? So you say, well, it's going to take 50 years or so at least, if it's even doable, for you to trick people into thinking that you look good. Because there's a difference between people saying, wow, you look more handsome than everyone else, and you're sabotaging everyone else, and we know that a lot of these people are far more handsome than you are. Those are two different scenarios. And it's the reason why I'm right should be clear-cut. And the domino effect, you should understand it to a large degree already. Plus, when you look up into a dictionary, because a lot of these guys are nerds these days, they're trying to get people to look up to, like Nikola Tesla. When you look up the word nerd in a dictionary, you get foolish and contemptible. That's by definition, as defined by nerds. If you look hard enough, you'll come across definitions like worthless. So boringly studious, foolish and contemptible, worthless. And so that brings us to point number 3. They might say that they don't want people to look up to heterosexual people because magic is very much about the game and the cage, right? The magic is a play on words for I'm cage, and I'm, the next word being gay, and the last letter C, how people see things, what they see, what have you. Again, that goes back to 50 years. As it stands now, the trannies have rocked the boat, okay? Gay parades are seen as stupid and pointless. And if you look up in the Urban Dictionary, the definition of gay historically, and a lot of people remember this, it's still a saying. They'll say that's, and they'll say that it's gay. And what they're referring to is it's stupid and pointless. They say, hey, let's all go to the park and dress like bunny rabbits. Say, that's gay, right? And they're referring to, no offense to the LGBT community. If you feel offended by it, please put in the comments, and we'll straighten it out there so everyone can see. Okay? They're referring to it being stupid and pointless. So how could your complaint be, hey, I don't want them to say, wow, he's heterosexual, and that takes away from the gay, culture that they're in, when gay is already seen that way, and it's going to take 50 years at least, and almost certainly I'll be dead. Okay, so really quickly, when you look at the screen, you see Epstein and Lex Luthor from the Superman comic book or cartoon, and they're being used as points of references, like the commercial for some kind of gay or gayish movie called Spirited, or whatever that commercial is, right? It represents the gay spirit. And so obviously corporations use various tactics, like commercials, to confuse you about things, to get you to buy things you otherwise wouldn't. And people at a gay parade tend to be confused about things, right? They're scatterbrained, they're lashing out, they're out of touch, right? And so they're contributing to an environment where people are not making sound decisions. For example, if you're at war and you're behaving like a person at a gay parade, you're messing up, right? You're not using your head. That's not how battles are supposed to be fought, right? And so it is with making important decisions at this critical juncture in American history. And so you see people are funding movements to throw you off so that your friends and your families and your daughters and your grandchildren can make bad decisions at a very critical time. And so the quote I put there isn't something they actually said, but it's what their actions are saying. That they want to confuse people to abuse them, right? Rhyme and reason. Use, confuse, and abuse as part of the ruse, as part of the scheme, the plot, the ruse. This is key here. So what is best for everyone, including whites, Jews, and LGBT people, is to think clearly, to be more healthy. If people are more healthy, there'd be 3 times as many attractive females conservatively. When you mess up their genes, you mess up their hormones, you mess up things with using things in the air and in the food and in the water and in the drinks, you make them less attractive. When you promote cultures that make them less healthy and less attractive, you make them less attractive. When you get them to be evil and petty, they're less attractive. Think about it.